Hey guys, and welcome back to Gardens and Grace. For those of you that don't know me yet, my name is Tasha, and today I'm out here cleaning out my chicken run, and I'm gonna be adding some bedding to my chicken coop. And so I thought I would take you guys along on this process. It's kind of a dirty job, but it's not too bad and it won't take us very long. But I wanted to take you guys along for this process, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the deep litter method that I use when it comes to my chickens. And if you haven't heard that term before, I'll explain what that is in a moment. But the deep litter method that we use in our chicken coop, and also what we do with the chicken waste, chicken manure, how we can use that in the garden to create essentially almost a closed system. My system's not completely closed. I know a lot of people who do have a closed system that they use in their garden, meaning that they don't have to bring in any additional soil amendments or anything like that. Everything they are able to use manure. They are able to use the manures and things that are locally on their property to maintain their gardens and their soil, and also then use that garden to feed the animals that are on their property. And that would be what we would call a closed system. Now, I don't fully have a closed system, but I do use my chicken manure and the chicken waste in a lot of really awesome ways. I use my chickens essentially to compost for me. And that kind of brings me to deep litter method. So with deep litter method, what we're essentially doing is creating a compost in place system. So in my chickens' coop, when they poop, it's really high in nitrogen. This is gross, but chicken poop is really high in nitrogen. So in their coop, I will add a bedding that's really high in carbon, like pine shavings. And then what'll happen is, because the bedding is high in carbon, the manure is high in nitrogen, I'm essentially creating a compost system by adding a lot of bedding. And as they add more waste, as they poop more, I come in and add more bedding until we have something like 18 inches of bedding. And the lower levels are ultimately becoming compost, and the top levels are obviously have new manure on them, and you're just continuously adding bedding. So with the deep litter method, rather than coming out and cleaning the coop out once a week, we're coming out and adding more bedding once a week, which is what I'm going to be doing today. And I take a little bit of a different approach in my chicken run. And so today I'm going to be actually out here working in the chicken run area. I'm going to be pulling out some of the bedding and the manure that's on the ground, and also the food scraps that are out here. So I've created compost right here in my chicken run area. Now this compost is still really hot, so we'll talk about that. The chickens are pecking my tripod right now, so I can't do anything with these nosy little things. So essentially, I've created a compost system in my chicken run area. As I'm throwing out food scraps, I also have pine shavings down on the ground. The chickens are defecating, and all of that is creating this very rich soil. If I were to add this soil to my plants right now, essentially, like I said, a lot of this is compost and it's very high in nitrogen. If I were to add it directly to my plants, it would be what we would call that too hot. What I mean is it would be too high in nitrogen, and it could burn my plants because it's just so high in nitrogen. So what I'm gonna do instead is clean out the top layer of this run, take off, just that top layer, throw it in my compost pile so it continue to break down. And in the fall, I'll be able to add it to my garden beds when I put them to rest. It'll add a ton of organic matter to the soil, and it'll continue to break down. So I'm going to be doing that today, and then replacing the top layer that I take out with some more pine shavings. And as I continue to bring out food scraps, as they continue to defecate, we're just continuing that process. So really simply, that's what I'm doing today. I'm just gonna rake out this top layer of soil and manure and pine shavings and food scraps, throw it in my little garden cart here, and take it over to the compost pile where it can continue to break down until the fall. And then, like I said, I'm gonna add the pine shavings. So I'm just kind of raking everything into a pile. I've been kind of doing that. I throw their food scraps into a pile whenever I throw them out here. I throw the food scraps into a pile. And so that composting process already begins to break down in this pile over here. And now I'm just going to add their manure to this pile and then pull it out. It only takes a few minutes. So like I said, it only took a couple of minutes, and this is the pile I created. I just scratched off that top layer and the pile that I kind of maintain here. I'm gonna shovel this into this little garden cart and take it over to the compost pile now, and then we can add the pine shavings in. And I'm also gonna add some pine shavings into their coop, and I'll show you that process as well. That's one cart full. Really, one or two more should be good enough. This will also kind of help keep the flies down, keep, you know, we don't want them walking around in their own manure and getting sick from just having a ton of manure on the ground. Okay, that's definitely better. During the summer sometimes, right now I'm doing kind of a deeper clean out. During the summer, when it's hot and it smells bad, a lot of times I will come out here once a week and just do a quick scrape down, you know, 5 minutes to pick up some of the poop. But I'll be honest with you, it's been quite a while since I've done that because it has been so hot. So today I needed to take off a little bit more. Ideally, I'd like to come out here, like I said, once a week and just take out some of the droppings, and then try to like kind of maintain a pile over here where I'm putting their food scraps and whatnot that they can eat. I do tend to drop their food in this pile here, so I try to make sure that I got most of the droppings up out of the pile, but I don't see any. So that when I drop their food here, they're not obviously eating from their droppings, you know, out of a pile that's full of their droppings as well. But ultimately, they're chickens. They'll poop where they eat. It's really gross. But they make great compost. Okay, I'm going to show you how we're going to add pine shavings to the inside of the coop. I'm going to come back out and throw pine shavings down on the ground out here in a moment, but I'm going to take what I have. I have a bag over there, so I'm going to take what I have and add some to the coop. It's been, to be honest with you, I normally try to do this once a week. It's probably been about 2.5, maybe 3 weeks since I've added shavings, so it's definitely time to do it. And I can smell it. It's starting to smell. That's the thing. If you're using the deep litter method and you're doing it right, it won't smell very bad. You might, you know, a little smell here and there, but it won't smell bad at all. If you allow it to go a couple of weeks, you will definitely notice there will be a foul odor. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And if you have neighbors, they won't like you for that. Okay, so this is the inside of my chicken coop. I'm kind of, my nesting boxes are a little wonky, but they work. But anyway, this is the inside. This is where my chickens sleep. They all roost up there. They actually really need a bigger roost, but I didn't realize I was gonna have 6 chickens when we made the plans to build this. And so the roost is really only big enough for 4 chickens, but I have 6. So we definitely need to add another roost. But right now they still fit all up there. This is, you can tell when chickens sleep, where chickens sleep is where they really poop. So chickens poop all the time, but the area that they sleep in, you'll find the most of their droppings, because that is where they poop the most, is when they sleep. It's really weird. So we need to add a lot of pine shavings to this area. We're gonna clean out the nesting boxes a little bit, because I normally add straw to the nesting boxes. They've been kind of getting in this one and just kind of hanging out in there. I don't really know why, but we don't want that. So we're gonna pull the pine shavings out of that, and we're gonna add some straw, which I have. And then they'll kick this around. So you'll see how, but here you can kind of see how it's starting to turn to compost, right? Like this is broken down. It looks like dirt, but it's not. It's the manure along with the pine shavings. And so whereas it gets like that, that is broken down. That is good. That doesn't smell bad. We'll be able to put that on our garden beds in the fall and allow them to rest. Now I still would, even this, even though it looks broken down, it's still going to be really high in nitrogen. We're not going to want to add it directly to our plants, but what we can do is add it to our beds that we're resting over the winter time, or we can add it to the compost bin and allow it to break down further. And when I say break down further, if you're going to clean out your chicken coop, probably a best practice would be maybe 90 days before you have plants in it. 90 days is about enough time for it to break down so that it's not super hot. Now there's variables that go along with that. So, you know, it might take a little longer, it might take a little less, but usually 90 days is enough time for your chicken manure to compost down enough that it's not going to burn your plants when you put it around your plants. So like I said, a good practice would be putting it on your garden beds in the winter when there's nothing planted, and then you can plant in the spring, or adding it to your compost pile and allowing it to break down in there for a few months before you add it to your garden. So just some thoughts and ideas on that. We're going to move what's in the nesting boxes out of the way, and we're going to add in some new pine shavings. I'll show you guys that. So it's evening time here, and it's still actually really, really hot. That's the hard part about July. The weather is excruciating, and it's hard to want to do anything. I think I have a chicken that wants to lay an egg right now. And I am in her way. All right, well, come back and add the straw to the nesting boxes in a minute. We'll add the pine shavings first, and then we'll add just a light layer of straw. Fun fact, chickens actually will come in here and kind of scratch, and originally I laid down a really thick layer of straw thinking that that's what they wanted to nest in. It was not. My chickens will throw it out and kind of move it around, and they'll actually try to lay their eggs on the wood part. They'll try to get down to the wood, the particle board, to lay their eggs. So yeah, I didn't know that, but my chickens, at least my chickens, don't like a thick bedding for their nest boxes. So right now I'm using these fine pine shavings. I normally use the flakes in their coop area and the fine pine shavings in their run, but this is just kind of what I have right now, so I'm using it. I do have some of the flakes. This bag's open, so I'm using it first, but it won't matter. My chickens they're not gonna care, and it'll work for composting in their coop. But if you have baby chickens, really important, when you have your baby chickens, when you first get them, and they're tiny little baby chicks, you do not want to use these thin pine shavings because they might eat them, and it's not good for a baby chicken to eat. So it can cause a lot of problems. They could even die from it. So just best practice, don't use this. Don't use the fine pine shavings when they're newly hatched little baby chicks, but you can use it as they get older. And I'm just kind of throwing a light layer over it. I'm making sure that all the manure is covered. They'll scratch it around themselves, so where I'm putting it now, I'll come out here tomorrow and it'll all be moved. They like to determine how their little house is set up and organized and laid out and decorated, I guess. They're also nosy, so as soon as I get done doing this, I guarantee you they'll all go up in here and start scratching around and pecking and checking it out. Chickens are really nosy creatures. I'm sure I say that all the time. I think I've talked about it in other videos, but this kind of brings me to my whole idea and system of lazy composting. A lot of people will create compost piles, compost bins, and create compost within 90 days or 6 months or something like that. I don't generally do that. I have done that. So if you're going to create compost and you want to create it quickly, it requires a lot of work. It requires you to turn it. So aerobic compost, it's basically where we're adding air into the compost pile, and that aerobic process, so that just means with air. So by oxygenating the compost pile, we're creating an environment where it can break down really quickly. And a lot of people, we'll call it hot composting, right? So you want your compost pile to get really hot. You're going to turn it every day, every other day, something like that. And pretty soon you will have compost. That is a lot of work. I have done it. I have created quick compost. It has worked great. But I'll be honest, I am not coming out here and turning a compost pile every day. It is a lot of work, and I'm just not about that life. So I do something a little different. I do a lazy compost system. You can do that though. You can do a hot compost. You can do a quick compost. You can get really technical with your ratios of greens and browns. When we say greens and browns, we mean nitrogen would be your green and browns would be your carbon. So a good source of carbon would be something like cardboard, or pine shavings is a good source of carbon. And something like for nitrogen, it would be grass clippings or your used coffee grounds or your kitchen scraps. Those are all really high in nitrogen. Newspaper would be really high in carbon. So basically all of those things want to break down. Nature is going to want to break them down. They break down all on their own without human intervention all the time. Natural processes will break them down. If we want to get compost quickly, we can, like I said, we can get really technical with our ratios of greens and browns. I don't do that. I typically do a layer of nitrogen, a layer of carbon. A lot of times in my lazy composting, I don't even really worry about doing that. I just, whatever I have, if I have some cardboard, I throw it in. If I rip it up in small pieces and I throw it in. As I have kitchen scraps, I throw it in. My lazy composting system kind of looks like that. I fill one bin at a time, and then when it's about ready, I just kind of toss it over into the ready to use compost pile. A lot of times I'll have bits of material that aren't fully broken down, and so at that time I can kind of sort it. I can take the finished compost and sort it from the not finished compost. The finished compost will go in the pile that's ready to be used, and the not finished compost will go back into the bin to continue to break down. So that's really the only time I turn it, right? Now in that, it takes me a long time to produce actual finished compost. So what I do instead is, like I said with this, I will use my chickens to compost. I'll take their waste, throw it in my compost pile. At the end of the season, in the fall, late fall, when I set most of my garden beds to bed, I will clean out their coop. I will clean out their run really good. I will throw all of that down on my garden beds. I will also throw down all the compost that I have in the fall, whether it's broken down or not. I'll even take, if I have kitchen scraps, I will even take those and bury them in my garden beds because they will break down over the winter. And at that point, it's gonna break down and it's gonna add organic material to the soil. It's gonna be nutrient rich. It's gonna make my soil nutrient rich, and it'll break down over the winter. So I don't have to do all of this extra work of creating compost. I literally just throw organic matter that's partially broken down compost onto my garden beds, and it's fine. Now, I wouldn't do that if I had plants in it, obviously. You can throw down mostly broken down compost on plants that are already in your garden, if you're gonna use it as like a top dressing. You just wouldn't wanna mix it into the soil because it may rob the nitrogen from the soil while it continues to break down, or it may be too high in nitrogen, thereby burning your plants. Okay, so I've added these pine shavings, and let me show you. Okay, so before we could see the waste, we could see the manure. And what I did was I just added enough pine shavings to cover all of the manure. And it no longer smells, there's no smell. And this only took a couple of minutes. Technically, like I said, I should really be doing this every week. And this will be fine. And it's gonna continue to just break down and make compost. Now I'm gonna go, like I said, I'm gonna add just a little bit of straw to the back of I'll add a little bit of straw to the nesting boxes, but that's really all. Now the rest of this pine shavings, look, there you can see a chicken. So the rest of the pine shavings, I'm just gonna kind of add a really light layer onto the ground, just to kind of cover any manure that's left. I'm not gonna add a whole lot to the ground. So now, as you can see, I've just added a little layer of the pine shavings on the ground. No big deal. The chickens are, I see them over there in the corner, kind of pecking around. See, they're really nosy. They want to figure out what I'm doing. I think they're really looking for food. And see, you'll see that they'll start scratching. And all the pine shavings I just put down, they're gonna move them out of the way. That's what they do. Believe it or not, I had a ton of fun doing a mundane task for my chickens that I do quite often, and I had fun doing it because I had to hang out with you guys and talk while we did it. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, for talking about lazy composting and deep litter, and how we can use our chickens in the garden, how we can use their manure as fertilizer, as compost. And drop me some comments down below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you think about, you know, do you have chickens? Are you using chickens in your garden? Are you using a hot composting system, a cold composting system? You know, are you buying bag compost? Let me know what you're doing in your garden. And also send me some, please feel free to send me some suggestions of things you guys want to see, things you guys want to talk about. I love getting to do these videos where we just get to talk through things and we get to learn together. So if there's anything you want to know, please drop a comment down below and let me know. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in my garden. May your garden be full of grace and may you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.